Iran just fired the Sejjil ballistic missile at Israel for the first time in this war. Serious. One of the most serious weapons in Iran's entire arsenal reserved for final stage escalation. They call it the dancing missile. Not because of what it looks like, but because of what it does to missile defense systems. During last summer's war, fragments from a single stage warhead reached Israeli soil after the AOS system failed to fully neutralize it. Concerned. Now it is back in volume at the worst possible moment. On Sunday the 15th of March, the 54th wave of Operation True Promise 4 escalated. Sirens went off across more than 140 locations in Israel. From Tel Aviv to Herzliya to the southern suburbs, missile debris struck a residential building used by the U.S. Council in Jerusalem. The debut of this monster weapon landed less than 24 hours after U.S. officials reported that Israel is running critically low on the interceptors built to stop exactly this kind of threat. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to break down what makes the Sejjil so hard to detect, and you'll see why the Israeli government approved $826 million in emergency defense spending on the same night their own military said there was no shortage. Here's what we know. The Sejjil is not a conventional ballistic missile. It is a medium-range, solid-fueled, two-stage weapon that Iran designed and built entirely on its own. Here is why it matters. Most people hear ballistic missile and picture a weapon flying in one big arc, trackable and killable by a modern defense shield. The SIL does not work that way. Its warhead carries what is called a maneuverable re-entry vehicle. As it comes down at speeds above Mach 5, it does not follow a straight path. It shifts direction continuously, unpredictably. That is why they call it the dancing missile. A standard interceptor like the Arrow calculates where a warhead will land and sends a kill vehicle to that point. When the landing point changes every fraction of a second, that calculation falls apart. The only option is to fire multiple interceptors in a spread pattern and hope one connects. That burns through stockpiles fast. We will come back to why that specific problem is about to become Israel's defining crisis in this war. And there's a second layer. The Sejjil runs on solid fuel. That means it sits fully loaded on a mobile launcher ready to fire in minutes. No fueling trucks, no lengthy preparation visible to satellites. Iran has stated that from the city of Natanz, the Sejjil reaches Tel Aviv in under 7 minutes, from ignition to impact. And because it launches from trucks, not fixed sites, it survives even when bases and facilities are destroyed. The coalition has hit over 7,600 targets inside Iran since February 28th. The SIL does not need any of them. Iranian engineers have also reportedly coated the SIL in radar-absorbent material, shrinking its radar cross-section. Harder to see on screens, harder to track during descent, harder to kill. This is a dual-layer problem. Detection and interception, both degraded simultaneously. Israel's Arrow 3, the system designed to engage threats outside the atmosphere using hit-toggle technology, depends on precise tracking. A reduced radar signature shortens the detection window and compresses the time available to launch an intercept. The A2, which engages targets inside the atmosphere, faces the same degradation compounded by the warhead's active maneuvering during terminal descent. Uzi Rubin, the former director of Israel's Ballistic Missile Defense Organization, has argued that the Sejjil appears more distinct from foreign missile designs than many earlier Iranian systems, but open-source assessments still say foreign assistance in Iran's missile development is highly likely. Development of the Sejjil is generally believed to have begun in the late 1990s. It was first tested in 2008, tested again in 2009, and reappeared in the Great Prophet 15 exercise in 2021, where analysts said it may have shown upgraded guidance. What can be said with confidence is that the SIL is a more mature and refined system than it was when it first appeared. What cannot be said with confidence is that the missile used in this war carried a specifically confirmed integrated GPS and inertial navigation package, because that has not been publicly established. Quote, reports of a longer-range Sejjil 3 also remain unconfirmed. Stay with me, because the timing of this deployment collides with a second crisis that multiplies its significance. On Saturday, March 14th, the American news outlet Semaphore published a report sourced from unnamed U.S. officials, stating that Israel had informed America it is running critically low on ballistic missile interceptors. Critically low. Israel entered this war already short on Arrow-class interceptors after expending large volumes during the June 2025 conflict with Iran. The United States fired more than 150 THAAD interceptors during that 12-day engagement alone. According to CSIS, the current war's pace dwarfs that campaign, while 16 days of sustained bombardment across 54 waves has pushed the system further toward a breaking point. One U.S. official described this situation to Semaphore as, quote, something we expected and anticipated. End quote, expected, anticipated. Those are not words of surprise. Those are words of a government that watched a problem build and chose not to solve it before the next war arrived. The same official stressed that the United States is not facing a parallel shortage. Quote, we have all that we need to protect our bases and our personnel in the region and our interests. End quote. Read that again. Our bases, our personnel, our interests. Not a single reference to Israel's defense needs in that sentence. The Pentagon began efforts in January to expand THAAD production. And America has been redeploying Patriot batteries from as far away as South Korea to cover bases in the Gulf. American air defense priorities are clear. They are pointed inward. Now, the IDF pushed back hard. An Israeli military official stated, quote, at this stage, there is no shortage of interceptors, end quote. They added that forces had prepared for a prolonged campaign. That denial landed within hours of the Semaphore report. And on its own, it sounds reassuring. Here's the problem. On the very same night, in a late Saturday phone vote, the Israeli government approved the emergency transfer of $2.6 billion shekels approximately $826 million to the Defense Ministry for what it labeled urgent and essential defense procurement. That is not the behavior of a government that considers its stockpiles adequate. That is a government writing emergency checks at midnight. Now consider what the dancing missile does to this equation. Every A3 interceptor costs several million dollars per unit and takes significant manufacturing time to replace. Production lines are not designed for wartime surge output. The Pentagon only began expanding THAAD production in January, weeks before the war started. A maneuverable warhead that requires multiple interceptor shots per inbound missile does not just stress the stockpile. It collapses the entire cost-exchange ratio. Iran fires 1 Sejjil, Israel burns 2, maybe 3 interceptors trying to stop it. Multiply that across dozens of inbound missiles per day, and the deficit accelerates faster than any factory can fill it. Even in a best-case scenario, the math does not hold, and it gets worse. Our CNN confirmed that Iran has begun equipping its ballistic missiles with cluster munitions. Israeli officials say roughly half of the projectiles Iran has recently launched have been cluster munitions, with warheads dispersing around 20 to 24 bomb bullets. Once those bomb bullets are released, systems like Iron Dome are not designed to clean up the entire spread. AP reported that at least 3 people had already been killed by these weapons, including 2 at a construction site in central Israel. 12 people total have been killed by ballistic missile strikes across the duration of this war. So the picture forming is this. Israel's high-altitude interceptors are under severe strain. Iran's newest weapon is specifically engineered to worsen that strain by demanding more interceptors per engagement, and half the inbound missiles are now carrying warheads that scatter smaller munitions even if the main body is killed. 3 layers of pressure converging simultaneously on a defense system that was already depleted when the first wave launched. Now look at the contradiction between what both sides are projecting. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stated on March 13th that Iran's entire ballistic missile production capacity has been functionally defeated. The IDF claims over 7,600 strikes inside Iran since February 28th, along with 1,100 in Lebanon. The Hanger Organization for Human Rights said on March 14th that at least 4,900 people had been killed in the first 14 days of the war, including 4,220 Iranian military personnel and 480 civilians. Iran's air defenses, according to Hegseth, no longer exist. That is an enormous volume of destruction. Iran's response, 54 waves and counting, including the debut of its most technologically advanced indigenous missile. A weapon that requires precision solid fuel manufacturing, sophisticated guidance assembly, and maneuverable re-entry vehicle integration. If production has been functionally defeated, this weapon should not exist on this battlefield. There are 2 explanations. Either the assessment is premature and Iran still retains manufacturing or launch capacity the coalition has not located, or the Sejjil was launched from pre-war stockpiles, meaning Iran is now reaching into its strategic reserves. Iran entered the war with an estimated 2,500 ballistic missiles of varying range and capability. The Sejjil was deliberately withheld for the first 53 waves. That restraint was a choice. Whether it signals strategic patience or desperation depends on how many remain in storage, and that number has not been published by anyone. On the Israeli side, Defense Minister Israel Katz described the conflict on March 14th as entering a decisive stage. He declared Iran would be met with, quote, strong, unyielding, and uncompromising steel-like resolve, end quote. The framing is confidence and forward momentum. Iran's framing is the mirror opposite. President Masoud Pezeshkian has called retaliation for Commune's assassination a duty and a legitimate right. Iran's foreign policy advisor told CNN that Tehran sees no path to diplomacy. The IRGC has vowed to pursue Netanyahu. Both governments are projecting total resolve and inevitable victory. Both cannot be correct. The evidence does not cleanly match either narrative. Meanwhile, the consequences are radiating outward. Oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz have been disrupted. Maersk suspended crossings. Shipping insurers are declining to write policies for Gulf transit. An Emirates flight recently turned back to Kochi after drone strikes forced temporary airport suspensions near Dubai. Energy markets are in turmoil. This war is not contained inside the borders of the belligerent. It is repricing risk across the global economy in real time. The plan from America and Tel Aviv was overwhelming air superiority, destroy the ability to shoot back, force a political collapse. The reality is a nation absorbing catastrophic damage to its fixed infrastructure and continuing to launch from dispersed mobile platforms using solid fuel weapons that do not require the facilities being bombed. The plan for Israel's defense was layered interception, Arrow for the long-range threats, David's Sling for the mid-range, Iron Dome for close-in rockets. The reality is a stockpile under pressure from a warhead specifically designed to defeat layered defense math and cluster munitions scattering below the interception floor. The dancing missile is now airborne, and the question neither government has confronted publicly is how many more waves this conflict can sustain before the numbers run out entirely. Thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate your support. Join the discussion in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. Who do you think is winning the war? Do you think the war is getting out of hand? Let me know. Please subscribe and like the video if you want to stay updated, and click the video on the screen to see another. I'll see you soon.